Hi Year 12, this is just another short video to go over the main features of our last battle. This battle is called the Battle of Hydaspes. Hydaspes is a little bit different battle to his other ones. Alexander's now king of the Persian Empire. His main opponent Darius has been eliminated, but he's still hungry for more power, so he's pushing further east into the territory of India. India is a new territory which no one from the Western world had ever sort of gotten that far before. So it's very unknown. The main issues Alexander's going to face here is this new Indian enemy. They use elephants, and he's also got a few issues with his own army and their loyalties. So just having a look at the map, Hydaspes is, as we said, far east, over in the Indian territory. So the army's been on this journey through Persia for almost a decade. Not quite yet, but they're getting tired. They've seen him through Granicus, Issus, Gaugamela, and you can see just how far east they're going. Hydaspes is way over, double the length of how far they'd already been before. So you can see why it is such a big feat and why his army may be a little bit sick and tired of all of this and wanting to go home. So like we said, there's a few challenges this time around. His opponent is King Porus. So Porus is the king of India. Even though he is a good match for Alexander, like he's a strong opponent, the two have a bit of a respect for one another, which Alexander and Darius didn't have, and the outcome kind of proves that. The main challenges Alexander's going to face are his army. They are so tired, they've been gone for nearly a decade, like I said, so they're starting to oppose Alexander. They're starting to question him, challenge him. Their loyalty is dwindling. They don't want to go this far. They'd like to go home. So that's a challenge in itself. The climate and conditions in Hydaspes are a big challenge. It is monsoon season, which means that there's heavy rainfalls. They've got to cross this Hydaspes river in monsoon season. So it's quite dangerous. It's not like Granicus. This time it is a big river, which is quite dangerous with all of this rain. Like I said, it's unknown territory. No one had been this far east before, so it's all sort of new. There's new diseases like malaria. A lot of them get quite sick after this, particularly because it's monsoon season. That means that the mosquitoes are rife, and Alexander himself gets quite sick after this battle, and many people think that's why he might have died from malaria. King Porus is going to use elephants as part of his army, so that's a big challenge. No one had probably ever seen an elephant, or at least fought one, so that's a challenge. So the main tactics for this battle are trickery. So Porus is set up on one side of the river and Alexander the other. If you have a look at Arrian's account on page 55 of your booklet, I've kind of summarised the main points rather than making you read the whole thing. And I'm just going to read a few points from these pages as I'm explaining the battle. So on page 55, it says that from Alexander's position on the bank of the river, he's able to see Porus with all his forces, including his squadron of elephants. So they can see each other. They're facing each other on each side of the river. Porus remained on guard in person, and he sent pickets, each under the command of an officer, to various points where crossing was predictable. So he's ready, Porus. He knows Alexander's going to try and cross, and he's got these kind of squadrons set up in the spots where he thinks Alexander might cross. Basically, Alexander's making it quite clear that he's going to wait out monsoon season. He's not going to cross until it stops raining. But secretly, he actually doesn't intend to wait. He's just kind of making that known so that Porus thinks he will wait. Now his main tactic here is every night he kind of sends down troops down the river. He makes all this noise as if he's going to cross. So Arrian tells us on page 55, every night he kept moving the greater part of his mounted troops up and down the bank of the river. making as much noise as possible, which might be supposed to precede an attempted crossing. Porus sprang up his elephants, followed these movements, guided by the noise, and Alexander gradually led him to make these marches parallel his own. It became a regular thing. This went on for some time, until Porus, finding that the Macedonians never went beyond shouts and yells, gave up. Clearly it was a false alarm. So he ceased to follow the movements of the enemy cavalry and stayed where he was in his original position, with lookouts posted at various points along the river. Thus, Porus, no longer expecting a sudden attempt under cover of darkness, was lulled into a sense of security, and this was Alexander's opportunity. So that passage on page 55 is the main description of his tactic. So he tricks Porus into thinking he's going to cross every night, kind of like the boy who cried wolf, I guess. You know, I do this every night, Porus follows, and he gets sick of it. He realizes that he's not going to do anything, so he stops following him. And that very same night that no one follows is the night they cross. So they get to cross unopposed, which is a huge advantage. Remember at Granicus, when they crossed, the Persians were there waiting for them, and that's where they hit the most amount of trouble. Crossing unopposed is a huge advantage. So when they get across the river, they're evenly matched and they're ready to fight. Once they're ready to fight, the main tactic is going to be these elephants. How are they going to beat this huge squadron of elephants? Now, I guess they didn't really know what the elephants would do, but Alexander wanted to use the tactic of pelting the elephants and trying to shoot down the drivers with arrows. And that works quite well. So once again, Arrian tells us that the Macedonian infantry advanced against them, shooting down the drivers, that's the elephant drivers, and pouring in a hail of missiles from every side upon the elephants themselves. It was an odd bit of work, quite unlike any previous battle. But once again, the strength and experience of Alexander's mounted troops were too much for them, and they were forced back on the elephants. In time, the elephants grew tired and their charges grew feebler. They began to back away, slowly like ships going astern. Taking his chance, Alexander surrounded the lot of them, elephants, horsemen, and all, and then signalled his infantry to lock shields and move up in a solid mass. So basically they scare the elephants, they're pelting them all the time, and they grow tired. They're quite unpredictable too. As soon as they get scared, they will revolt. Like, you can't control an elephant like you can a horse. So as soon as they decide they're going to turn around, they turn around. And they ended up causing a bit more damage to their own men than they did the Macedonians. Alexander's able to circle them all up and the battle's over. So for the outcomes, Alexander is successful, but Porus is quite a humble king. He is quite, I guess, he respects what Alexander's doing, and Alexander in turn respects Porus. So what he does is he actually makes him the satrap of the region. So he says, you know, I'm now the king of the Persian Empire. That includes India, but you can remain the satrap of this region. And Porus accepts that. So it's quite a good outcome for the two. Alexander establishes two new cities in this territory. He names one of them after his horse, Bucephalus. So things are quite strong here. He's got a satrap he trusts, and he's built two new cities. Now, Alexander tries to push on a little bit further, and this is one of the times where Alexander's army say, no, we're not going, and they actually stage a full revolt. They ignore his commands and they say, we're not going. So at this point in time, he doesn't have any options left. He has to turn around, and they start making their way back home. And it's on the way home that Alexander will die, and he doesn't die in battle. He dies from an illness. We do have to have a look at his death as one of our dot points, so we'll get to that a little bit later. But for now, he's finished all of his battles in his life. So Hydaspes is his last full battle. Okay, so for now, Year 12, you need to go back to Google Classroom and open the summary table and fill in the main details, just like you did for Gaugamela, and that will get you all up to speed for the dot point, the campaigns of Alexander, and we'll be moving on shortly. Thanks.